Well, welcome everyone to the Big Read. Hi, David. Hi, Miranda.
Hi.
Hello. Well, thank you for hosting, Harriet. I appreciate it.
Oh, and you're the co-host, David, so thank you too.
You betcha. And thanks, Miranda, for attending.
Yeah,
Of
thanks.
course.
I don't know how many other folks are going to sign in here. We can give maybe, it looks like it's 10:01. So maybe we could start. I don't know if we're going to have any more participants. Something I always like to ask folks when I'm talking about books or doing a book discussion or whatever is, what do you think of the book?
Well, I guess I'll start.
Go.
Yeah, I had heard of it before. And actually it's interesting. I felt like when I first picked it up, I was like, oh, I don't know what I think about this because it's so different from what I'm used to reading since it's from like a child's perspective. So I read part of it and was just kind of taking it all in. And I think at first I was like, I don't know why this was so popular, so well known, but like on a second reading, I pick up more of the details and the nuance, and I'm like, okay, I see why this story is important. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting.
Cool.
I felt the same way. I remember, David, you and I spoke, and you mentioned that you were an English major or literature, as was I was also, and you read that for school. And I realized because it was written in 1984 that I was past that. So I'd heard of it, and I thought one day I would read it, and I never did, but I'm glad this opportunity came up because I did enjoy it. At first, it's a novella, it's 110 pages, but it's a very easy read, but I agree with Miranda, there's a lot of layers to it, much more to it than meets the eye. Definitely interesting. I now want to read her other things.
Nice. Yeah, I think it really does kind of work on multiple levels, really, because just reading about what the author intended and stuff. And I don't know if you had a chance to read any sort of like, what was she, when she was writing, what was her intentions and that sort of thing. And one thing I thought was kind of interesting is, she talks about wanting to appeal to an audience that maybe they've worked all day. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So that she made the chapters purposely short, and she said, "Oh, I can, you can pretty much pick up the book anywhere in the book, and you're not going to feel like you missed out on the story." So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I think she said something along the lines of, "I wanted to write a book for people who come home and their feet hurt from working all day." And I thought that was pretty interesting. So yeah, the chapters are super short, and it's kind of like what you were all saying. On the first reading, it does appear like it might be, somewhat simplistic or what have you. But when you really dive into it, it's very poetic. There's some really beautiful language in there, and there really is a lot going on. So, and it's kind of interesting. What do you think of, like you say, written from a sort of an adolescent's perspective or a child's perspective? How did you think that worked out?
Oh, go ahead.
You want me to go ahead? Well, what I thought,
Yeah.
first of all, what I thought was interesting, how each chapter is named, which makes it interesting. So you get the gist of it before you start reading. I've read a lot of books, of course, growing up, and young adult books, but in some respects, I think her language is more sophisticated than a 12-year-old normally maybe speaks, if that makes sense. And it's poetic because the character loves to write. Like one of the chapters about the trees. the way she talked about the trees being grounded. Yeah, it's very poetic and lyrical, I thought.
Mhm. For sure.
Yeah, I think there's an innocence to it. So, as she's describing what, if an adult were writing, we would probably be like, oh, these are major problems in society. She's just like, oh, this happened to this guy. And, she'll describe it in like a poetic way, or like, I think the one I was trying to kind of flip through the book before we had this discussion, like the guy's cousin who shows up in this really nice car and they all get in, and then all of a sudden he tells them to get out and the police chase him and he walks away in handcuffs and they never see him again. It just kind of leaves you with, you can imagine, what's happening. But from a child's perspective, she's not putting all those pieces together yet. She's kind of, you see her thinking through different themes and making some conclusions throughout the book, but there is still an innocence to it. And I even noted reading it, just even how different her experience probably is not growing up with as much technology and social media, and just how different it was even 10, 20 years ago for kids taking in reality versus kids today, just like how different their experiences are because of that.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I mean, back in 1984, or when I guess you wrote the book in 1984, but I suppose, what would you say? These are almost semi-autobiographical experiences from, what would you say, like 10 years prior to that? I think she was in graduate school when she wrote the book. So you want to say like early 70s maybe. But things that I don't think totally have changed as much until you hit that social media, because I think things are much more localized back then. You didn't really, I don't know if there was really a way to experience the outside world as much as there is today with social media. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, really.
For sure. I don't know if you ever read have you ever read The World is Flat?
Oh no, I never have.
That's a really pretty interesting book. It came out quite a few years ago. I think it maybe came out in like 2003. But it's written by a New York Times columnist. Did you know Thomas Friedman?
Oh, yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah, that's who wrote that. But anyway, he talks about with modern technology. That was written a long time ago, 2003. So there wasn't really social media back then. But he's talking about cable news, and he's saying that people can experience their humiliation in HD TV, like it's coming in to you, it's coming into your living room, and you're like, oh my goodness, what are all these other parts of the world, you see this great wealth, and then people and not experiencing that, or really it's coming in in HD, and they're like, oof, so that's kind of creates a lot of resentment, I think, too. And I guess you see that with social media too. It's not always helpful, because it's kind of like you see how supposedly other people are living, and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't have a yacht.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not always super helpful, I don't think. Did you have any particular parts of the book or passages that you enjoyed?
You want me to? Well, as I mentioned, I like the one about the trees. And even though I found it difficult to read, I like the one about Mamacita, who moves to the neighborhood and doesn't want her little boy to learn English. And she doesn't want to leave the house.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that was, well, I guess what I was thinking about the book, I guess what I found interesting was the title. I guess it drew me, the part about Mango, the house on Mango Street, because when you think of mangoes, you think of something lush. but then the house itself, because remember, she mentions the authors or Esmeralda, she would like, I think, a pink house. And if you think about mangoes, the inside of a mango, but that's what struck me, how when she described Mamacita, how she had, I think, blush shoes or maybe rosettes on her shoes. And she thought she was beautiful, even though she called her overweight, or I think they used the term fat, but she said she's beautiful, and I like that. And I just found that that just touched me. I'm not sure why it really touched me. My maternal grandmother came over from Czechoslovakia, and had to learn English, and she passed away when I was 7. But I don't know. It just I really like that chapter, and I like the chapter about the trees. I don't know. It just made me think of Robert Frost, I guess, because of the trees. Now I'm reaching, I know, but
No.
I really did. The more I looked at the chapters and this novella, I just really like it. I think I may sit down and read it again.
Nice.
It's not captivating.
That's cool. Are
I
we
must
talking
wonder-
about? Oh, I'm
No, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, with the Mango Street, I haven't read anything the author said about maybe why it was called that, but I know like mangoes are a pretty common, like just kind of tropical fruit. So in like Mexico, or I don't know if there's symbolism behind that, since they kind of describe that street in their neighborhood as more of a brown street, and kind of allude to other people moving away and then people like them living there. So I don't know if there's any significance behind that, but
It's a beautiful title, I think.
Now, are you talking about, Harriet, are you talking about on page 74? Or are you talking about the chapter called Four Skinny Trees?
Yes, I really like that. It was sad, but it was uplifting too. That yes, I really like that chapter. I'm not sure why.
Four skinny trees with skinny necks and pointy elbows like mine.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, I really did.
Four who do not belong here but are here. Four raggedy excuses planted by the city from our room as we hear them, but Ninny just sleeps and doesn't appreciate these things. Their strength is a secret. They send ferocious roots beneath the ground. They grow up and they grow down and grab the earth between their hairy toes and bite the sky with violent teeth and never quit their anger. This is how they keep. Let one forget his reason for being. They'd all droop like tulips in a glass, each with their arms around the other. Keep, trees say, when I sleep, they teach. When I'm too sad and too skinny to keep keeping, when I'm a tiny thing against so many bricks, then it is I look at trees when there is nothing left to look at on the street. Four who grew despite concrete, four who reach and do not forget to reach, four whose only reason is to be and be. That's pretty inspiring. Four who reach and do not forget to reach. So she's kind of, I guess it's kind of like she's going through adversity and she's striving to be her best self, I guess.
Yes.
That's my interpretation anyway. I really liked the one Darius and the Clouds on 33. You can never have too much sky. You can fall asleep and wake up drunk on sky, and sky can keep you safe when you are sad. Here there is too much sadness and not enough sky. Butterflies too are few, and so are flowers and most things that are beautiful. Still, we take what we can and get and make the best of it. Darius, who doesn't like school, who is sometimes stupid and mostly a fool, said something wise today. Though most days he says nothing. Darius, who chases girls with firecrackers or a stick that touched a rat and thinks he's tough, today pointed up because the world was full of clouds, the kind like pillows. You all see that cloud, the fat one out there, Darius said? See that? Where? That one next to the one that looks like popcorn? That one there. See that? That's God, Darius said. God? Somebody little asked. God, he said, and made it simple.
That was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So it's kind of, so it almost seems like between those two chapters, there's kind of like this longing for nature, I guess,
Yeah.
if you want to call it, in the concrete jungle, maybe.
Mhm, mhm.
You know, it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of green space where she's growing up here. And seems like she's craving that maybe a little bit. So it's pretty interesting. Anything else stand out in the book that you want to talk about?
The chapter in my copy, it's page 58, Born Bad. I'm not sure if my copy is different though. Talking about her aunt, Lupe, that, you know, later they were playing a game and acting like sick like her, and then she died. But she talked about how her aunt actually meant a lot to her because she would go over there and read, and then she would encourage her to just continue that love of reading and writing. And I did, it says, you just remember to keep writing, Esperanza, you must keep writing, it will keep you free. And I said yes, but at that time I didn't know what she meant. So I did read, kind of reading about the book a little bit, that, you know, the author, that may be a bit of her personal experience, just how she really found outlets in writing. And so that's kind of reflected in Esperanza. And they do talk about the importance of education in the book a lot. Like her dad wanted to send her to the Catholic high school as opposed to the public school so that she would get a good education. So just like the importance of writing, what that meant to her, and someone inspiring her to do that.
Yeah, that was a beautiful chapter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. She kind of talks about writing as a way out of bad circumstances.
Mhm. Well, in that 1 year, from the age of 12, she lost her aunt and she lost her grandfather. But yes, that was a beautiful chapter. But she understood her finally. That when we look at someone who's older, we think one thing, and then when we get perspective or get to really know someone, our perspective changes. Mm-hmm. And how we view that person. There's a lot of depth in this, a lot of depth.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially in so short of a book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like, you know, if you think about like Ernest Hemingway kind of thing, there's a lot of packed into short sentences and stuff, which isn't easy to do.
No, I agree.
Any other thoughts on the book? Well, you know, something that, you know, it kind of struck me is that, you know, there seems to like there's a, you know, it's definitely not light reading in terms of, you know, it's not, there's definitely spots of optimism and stuff. I mean, didn't she say her name means hope in Spanish? Because I mean, there's a lot of, you know, like domestic abuse and just, you know, things are not super warm and fuzzy. You know, I guess the prevalence of domestic abuse, you know, really stuck out to me. Kind of like people trapped, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Just finding a way out. I think that's one of the messages. And she realizes she doesn't, as like her friend, she doesn't want to become her friend. She doesn't want to get married and have children, and then you're in another environment that's just as bad. That writing and going to school will be her way of getting out of that neighborhood and making something of herself. I mean, it has a really good message to
Is that Sally, her friend?
correct. But I mean,
Okay.
I think the book has a really good message.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know, like, because since this book came out in 1984, it'd be interesting to know how many people have been inspired by this book.
Yeah, that would be, that really would.
Miranda, thoughts? I feel like you want to say something.
Yeah, we want
Oh. Well, since me, speaking Spanish, I found it interesting. There's not a ton of Spanish. It's primarily like an English narrative. Her name is Spanish, and then they refer to some cultural foods, but a lot of times in more literature today, like Hispanic Latino literature today, you see a lot of Spanglish, a lot of code switching. And I don't know, like, I know I have a lot of friends from Texas who grew up in an area where they were growing up, they were really shamed at school if they spoke Spanish, and encouraged to only speak English. I don't know what this area was like, but it is very interesting that like her identity is, she's primarily communicating in English with just a little bit of Spanish words and kind of cultural symbols thrown in there. And another thing with that was interesting, talking about her name being Hope. I know I think it was page 10 where she was talking about what she tells us, like her name means hope in Spanish. And then she also was just talking about her name meaning sadness and waiting. In Spanish, the verb to wait is esperar, and then the word hope is esperanza. So they're very like closely connected. So there's almost like a correlation between like waiting and hope. And I don't know if the author did that on purpose, but I thought that was interesting.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. Any other thoughts you want to say? Well, what about some of these questions here? There's questions in the front of the book. The house on Mango Street is set in Chicago, but are there areas in southern Indiana that remind you of Mango Street?
Maybe what they consider the project could be. Not really sure.
How is your neighborhood like or unlike Mango Street?
I mean, growing up at that age, or
Whatever you want.
well, we lived in an apartment in Louisville until I was 5, and then we moved to Clarksville. My dad wanted to be closer to the university where he taught. And I'm not sure why my parents chose Clarksville, but at that time, we lived in a ranch house in a neighborhood, and we had neighbors on either side that we were close to. My best friend lived down the street, and I guess what I liked about my neighborhood was it was just middle class, and we were all close. We all played kickball in the streets and just hung out at each other's house. And granted, it wasn't a city like Chicago, but it reminded me of it, and that, you know, everyone knew one another, and that's what I liked about it. Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, it was, really was.
I am from Louisville and still live there. So for Southern Indiana, I'm not sure. I do think of like West Louisville, that I feel like that area gets overlooked quite a bit. And there could be a lot of poverty there. So some aspects of the book remind me of that. I know every time I drive through, you just notice like just some of the buildings falling apart, and I've heard people from that part of town just feel like they're forgotten, and like the city isn't paying attention to them. So
were there characters or stories that reminded you of your community?
When I was reading this, I tried to put myself into that age group and not read it from a perspective of my age now, which made me, I think, enjoy it more. So I think each chapter had its own beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it really did. Says this book is dedicated to the women. Why do you think that is?
Because, well, just from the women were the ones who were the nurturers. Well, her mother, not so much, but the women were the ones who kept the families together. You know, the men, you know, they left, and the mothers were still there taking care of the children, making sure that they stayed intact, that it was still a family. And
yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, growing up, you know, my mother was a stay-at-home mom, so I sort of can relate to that. And the men, I mean, it was typical. The men went off to work, and the women stayed home with the children. Of course, you know, the mothers in this novella had to work just because of the poverty, but and maybe being a woman, you know, that was why she dedicated it to the women, because she knew what it took for them to get out and to rise above their circumstances and what she needed to do. Does that make sense?
Thoughts, Miranda?
Yeah, I think she's wanting to tell their stories. Like you could approach the same book and tell, you know, the guy's perspective, the younger boys or the fathers, but she's mostly highlighting the women's and the little girls' stories. And so I think a lot of the ones that she talks about, like just that are just working tirelessly, providing food, getting up, cooking, taking care of the kids. I think she's just by telling their stories, trying to give them value and just tell the world that they are seen, even though they may not feel like it.
I agree, definitely.
Makes sense.
Beautifully said, Miranda.
Yeah, I guess just the violence, you know, against women is just so prevalent in this book.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, I think she does a good job of drawing attention to that.
I mean, but look at society today. I mean, it's not a stretch. You know, so many things are just as bad, if not 100 times worse. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of interesting. I was sort of researching not to be dark, but before I was researching the, domestic violence, prevalence. I was like, oh, because I guess it's just, it's something that I haven't really been around,
Mhm.
Right.
and yeah, it's interesting. They were talking about how it's really dropped a lot, in since like 1994. Like it used to be a lot more reported, and it was kind of the idea, is it less prevalent or is it just not reported?
Mm.
And one of the articles was making a point that, after 1994, some municipalities and stuff would make it, if you called the police for a domestic dispute, someone would have to go to jail.
Mm.
If you recall. So it was almost like, well, it almost sort of discouraged people to call for help. So I thought that was kind of something I didn't know about. And then I think too, I think it was fairly widely reported, during the pandemic. It seemed like it was really on the upswing. People are stuck at home. You can't really get out as much. So yeah, but yeah, just something that, I hadn't really thought a whole lot about before. And I think it does a good job of
Mhm.
drawing attention to that. Kind of like people suffering in silence, I guess. So the ending. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I haven't come from that or experienced any of that, but I have done some interpreting between English and Spanish. And so even just in immigration cases, like so often it's very prevalent, the domestic violence. And then especially if people are in a context, like if they're coming from another country and they don't know how the laws work here or how they're protected, and then their interactions with law enforcement have been difficult, and then there's a language barrier, they're just a lot less likely to speak out and try to seek help, just not knowing what's available. And then like you were saying, if a lot of times if somebody does reach out, like the authorities may not respond in the most helpful way. So it's just really hard.
That makes sense. And I don't know what I don't know what the laws are like in other countries. I don't know if,
Yeah, I don't either.
if it's more patriarchal than it is in the United States even.
Yes. In well, in the Middle East, yes, there are places, definitely.
Because, I don't think it was that long ago in the United States, even a woman couldn't even get a credit card, like in her name. I don't want to put you on the spot, Harriet, but do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that personally. But my husband and I, we went to Jordan. This was years ago. On our honeymoon, we were in Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. And something happened in Jordan to someone, and it was on a tour. But yes, it's very patriarchal in that part of the world. That's very interesting. We've traveled a lot. It's just perspective, and as bad as things can be, I'm still thankful I live in the United States. But no, I didn't grow up with abuse like that, and no, I never experienced that in trying to get a credit card. But I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience.
So yeah, that was something that really surprised me. I was like, you couldn't get a credit card?
You know,
Because I don't think it was that long ago. So that surprised me.
yeah. I'm just thankful things are different.
Yeah, so I guess we've made some strides in this
Long way.
country. I guess there's something to be said. I think we have a ways to go, but I think we're.
I mean, compared to watching the news about Afghanistan and the poor little children that just watching the news about the families can't afford to to take care of them. So at 7 or 8 years old, they're being sold into marriage. It's just horrible.
Jeez.
And it's just, it's just horrible.
Yeah. Not to go down that dark road.
I mean, certain aspects of this reminded me of watching the news.
Oh yeah.
For one friend who, Sally, who's, I think she's 14 now, I believe it is, and her husband goes to work, and she's went from one environment to the next, and she's still a prisoner. And the book, even though it was written in 1984, it's an eye opener, because we realize, when is enough enough? When are we going to make a difference? And I think by writing this, she made a difference, and the writers who have come after her, and the ones who want to write. I can't say enough good things about it. It's a beautiful book, and hopefully one day there won't be violence anymore. I don't know. Wishful thinking, I know.
Well, the Dalai Lama says world peace can be achievable, but at first it will come from inner peace. So think about that.
Wow. Yeah. I remember Mother Teresa one time, someone asked her, what can we do, Mother Teresa? And she said, if you want peace, she said, go home and make peace in your own family, and do that. And that will make a big difference. Don't try to conquer the world, just try to conquer your own little area. And it made sense. She was someone I really admired, respected. She really did make a difference.
Absolutely. How can I have peace where I live? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, what else do we want to say about the book?
I would say, if you haven't read it, please come to the library. We have plenty of copies still.
Nice.
Get a copy.
I think we have a few left in Spanish as well.
I think so, yeah.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I hope folks will read the book. It's definitely worth reading. It's it's poetic, it's short, it has a good message. I would almost recommend reading it more than once, because there is a lot of depth to it. And since it's so short, it's not a big stretch. So
we have a copy on Libby as well, if you're an audiobook fan. And that was the narrator. I can't remember if it was the author or not, but spoken almost like an adolescent. So that was a fun experience to listen to that, like hearing almost like a kid talk. So that's an option too.
nice.
I think we have a hardback, I believe, as well.
Nice. So yeah, if you read the book, you don't have to bring it back. You can give it to a friend when you get done reading it, and pass it on.
I like that.
Awesome. Well, should we call it a day, unless you want to keep talking? I could probably keep talking if you want to.
I can call it a day. What do you think, Miranda?
Yeah, I think we've said a lot of good stuff, and I'm sure there's so much more we haven't covered, but yeah, hopefully this will start some discussions in the community, as well as people are reading the books and passing them along, and prompt some good conversation.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely a good read.
Well, this has been fun. I hope we can do it again.
Oh, I think we will.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and have a lovely day, everyone.
Hey, you as well. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you too. Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.